Aunque lo bueno se demore, seguro llegará ese día, porque así es la vida. Que llorar no quiero, voy a sonreír por lo que yo tengo, por lo que yo tengo. Qué bonito amanecer cada mañana, qué bonitos tus ojitos de esperanza, qué bonito estar con gente que te ama.
Hello, everyone. So great to see you all today and to be in community with you all on this wonderful Tuesday night. It's also so great to see where everyone is zooming in from. So thank you all so much for sharing and for coming on out. So just for a brief introduction, my name is Manuel Teran, and I also go by Manny, and I use he, him pronouns. This year, I am serving as a Cutie Pot Programs intern at UCI's Pioneering Latinx Resource Center. And we here at the LRC are so excited to have the opportunity to speak today with Dr. Liliana Gonzalez. And first and foremost, I just wanted to start off by providing a brief introduction to our guest today. So Dr. Liliana Gonzalez graduated from UC Irvine in 2008 with a dual bachelor's degree in Spanish and Chicano Latino studies. From there, they went on to pursue a master's degree and ultimately a PhD in Latin American literature and cultures from the University of Arizona. They currently hold an assistant professor position in the Gender and Women's Studies Department at the California State University, Northridge. And their work focuses on Chicanx and Latinx, Latin American, cultural, and literary studies. Today, they will be joining us to share with us their program, Navigating Academia as a Queer Chicanx, from the politics of coming out to the privileges of non and passing. And with that, may you all please welcome me in joining Dr. Liliana Gonzalez.
Thank you. Thank you, Manny. I just wanted to thank everyone for being here. I know that there's so much going on and, just another Zoom event. So I do appreciate you all being here with me today. Thank you to the LRC. Thank you to Adeli Duron, and thank you, Manny, of course, for putting this together. I know it's a lot of work, a lot of emails back and forth. So I appreciate that. So yeah, thank you for that wonderful introduction. So today is really just going to be informal. I have a slideshow just to keep me on track because then I go on different tangents. So I'll be sharing my slides, but really is just a reflection of my academic trajectory and my professional trajectory and how important LAFA was to that. So yeah, I'm gonna share my screen. So yeah, as Manny was saying, my talk today is informal talk today is navigating academia as a queer Chicanx. And oops. So actually last year I was invited to do a guest essay for this online feminist journal that's in Spanish. And it was really the first time that I was able to just reflect on my experience because I was just so busy throughout all my graduate school. I was really just so busy and focused on trying to finish that I just was like, I don't have time to like reflect and just process everything that I was going through. So it was just like the first time that I was kind of took a pause and was able to like look back on my life and how I got to where I am now. So I wrote this. It's in Spanish, so if you're fluent, I think you can translate it. I'm not sure how, but if you kind of understand, it's available. I can send you the link too. But it's a lot of the things that I say there is what I'm going to talk about today. So just a little bit of an overview. I wanted to focus mostly on what my college experience was and the role that LAFA had in my college experience. But I did want to talk a little bit about like where I'm from, how I grew up, how I started to understand and come into my own as a queer Chicanx, and then my journey through graduate school, and finally to being lucky enough and fortunate enough to be able to have a tenure track position at 2 universities, but I can talk a little bit about that later. So let's see here. So I grew up in Anaheim. My parents are working class. They both immigrated from Mexico, from the states of Zacatecas and Jalisco, Mexico. I went to Anaheim High and graduated in 2003. And I don't know what the demographics are now, but this is really just kind of like roughly estimate in my head, right? Of how when I was there, it was, I could say at least 90% Latinx students there. So that was something that, you know, just really dictated my life, right? So just being in Anaheim, growing up there, and being able to be around mostly Mexicans, mostly Latinx people, really informed the person that I was. And then when I got to college, you know, and I think a lot of this speaks to a lot of our experiences, right? That when we do get to college, that we get a culture shock. So that was definitely something that I went through as I transitioned into college. So I have this picture here of my second birthday, and I'm wearing a dress. And the reason I put this, because as you'll see in my next pictures, that's something that changes. As soon as I was able to figure out my own style, I started to wear more masculine clothing. You know, of course, would get into arguments with my mom all the time. And eventually she got it, but it took a long time. And so just again, Manny gave you an overview of sort of my trajectory, educational trajectory, but I wanted to just really emphasize that. So I went to Irvine, culture shock, and I'll talk a little bit about what that was like. And then I went to the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and I was talking a little bit about this at the beginning, actually, that, you know, that was a shock because it was, I did not visit the campus before going. So I just went, I had no idea where it was. It was Central Illinois, middle of cornfields, 2 hours from Chicago. So any opportunity that I had, I would go to Chicago. So that was my escape. And I was there for 2 years. I did my master's in Hispanic studies, so Spanish department, basically. And then I kind of was just like, I need to go somewhere else. So I applied to the University of Arizona and I got in, and I was there for 6 years, and I really found a community there. I felt like I was thriving with a queer Chicanx, queer Latinx community. And it felt similar to what I had at Irvine. And then I graduated, and I was lucky enough to get a job at a R1 university at the University of Tennessee. However, University of Tennessee is a predominantly white institution. It's in Tennessee, and what they called it the shallow South. So it wasn't the deep South. But it sort of brought back trauma from Illinois, and then added the fact that it wasn't in the South, but it was in East Tennessee, so it's more like Appalachia, and it was very white and segregated. So not a lot of Latinos, not a big Latinx population there. I was there for 3 years, and then I was able to get a job in California. So finally coming back home, which I'm really happy about, and still very happy, and talk about it all the time. So I wanted to kind of frame the discussion, or frame our chat in terms of the politics of coming out, and sort of the privileges of passing and non-passing. And I kind of navigate those both in various ways. So I wanted to start with, when I talk about the politics of coming out, these are some of the things that come to mind, right? So when I was asked to potential themes for the series, I remember seeing decolonizing coming out, and what comes to mind is really this this fundamental at odds between minoritized groups, you know, like brown people, Chicanx, Latinx, black and brown people, and how we experience being queer in relation to dominant white groups, right? And so that dictates the mainstream narrative of coming out. And it's something that it's not always talked about. It's sort of kind of indirectly talked about, is the fact that it is about Catholicism too, right? So Catholicism versus Protestant religion. So that's something that we just talk about. We say Chicanx, Latinx, or Mexican, and we automatically think, or we're not automatically, you know, some of us may think Catholicism, but I think it's important to think about those directly, right? So you have the mainstream narrative of coming out, and I think that sometimes we feel pressure to follow that, but it really is about finding a balance between what makes sense for you, and what is healthy for you and the people around you too, like the people you love. So striking that balance and creating those boundaries. So that's something that, you know, you have to take into account instead of just following suit with the expectation of what it means to come out. It is really about what makes sense for you as a person, what's going to make you happy and healthy in the long run. And when I think about Chicanx, Latinx coming out, my mind goes automatically to Juan Gabriel, and just, you know, I'm sure that your moms, grandmas, even some uncles that, you know, kind of secretly liked Juan Gabriel, will know about Juan Gabriel's music, and the way that toward, you know, the end of when he became more well known, and throughout his life, he just became more comfortable with himself and his sexuality, never really coming out, because he would say, you know, lo que se ve no se pregunta. What is obvious, you're not supposed to ask if it's obvious, right? Why ask if it's obvious? And then there's notions like entender and familia, right? So la familia. So there's, you know, we'd be in a place and we'd see someone and be like, oh, maybe they're family, right? So kind of those thinking like, oh, él entiende, ella entiende, we understand each other. There's this understanding that things don't have to be said necessarily, but we understand and we go from there, right? And also understanding that coming out is a constant struggle and it's constantly happening. And it looks different for butches, for, you know, more masculine expressing individuals, for femmes, you know, for butches, it's sort of assumed that, you know, their sexuality is automatically assumed, versus femmes, they're automatically assumed as heterosexual. And for trans folks, right, that looks very different, that may not want to come out, like the coming out narrative, the mainstream narrative doesn't work for trans folks in many ways, right? And we really have to just understand that coming out is really a result of the assumption, the compulsory heterosexuality, right? Adrienne Rich's famous article, Compulsory Heterosexuality, that there's this like assumption that everybody is heterosexual. And so that is the coming out is to break with that assumption, right? So as time goes by and as you see more representation, you know, not representation isn't enough, right? But if you see more positive representation, then you start to understand that, you know, maybe coming out isn't necessary in the same way as it used to be. And that's a good thing, right? But, you know, it can vary on each individual's experience. When it comes to the privileges of passing and unpassing, the way that I sort of understand it is that my masculine expression is kind of like, sometimes it may be seen as like a disadvantage, right? Because people assume already that I'm queer, and then they, whatever you know, prejudice they might have might come out, right? But in other circumstances, you know, I mean, I don't have to deal with that. And it's like, okay, we're past that, you know I'm queer, we can move on, okay? But in another situation is that even if, you know, I'm not necessarily representative of dominant or ideal norms of gender expression, when it comes to my masculine expression, there are spaces where any sort of masculine expression is still favored. And that's true. I've seen that happen when, like, in meetings. And this has happened since undergrad. Like, I remember being in board meetings and like, it was like I had a co-chair and there was things that that kind of made me think that it was happened because of my masculine expression versus someone who was more femme or feminine presenting, right? And one of the things that, as I was thinking, as I was like, okay, what does it mean to like pass and non-pass when it comes to academia? So, you know, as you know, Latinx, a lot of things have to do with a lot of what our identity or subjectivity has to do with language, right? So I did a BA in Spanish and I did my master's in Spanish and Hispanic studies. And I didn't really experience this in undergrad. I think the Spanish program at Irvine, at least at that time, was really good about understanding Chicanx students and not just Latin American or Spaniards. But that wasn't the case when I got to Illinois. So it was really going against the grain of all these assumptions and stereotypes of what it meant to be a Chicanx and having a pocho accent when you spoke Spanish, and so many other things, right? Like having to prove yourself constantly, that you were, you know, that you spoke Spanish enough, that you wrote it well, all these things. In addition to being, you know, queer, and this like very like, I don't know how to explain it, stale heteronormativity. I don't know. And then passing as an academic, I mean, I'm sure that like we all can relate to how the imposter syndrome kind of takes over in many instances. But then I was kind of like, all right, well, I'll just fake it till I make it. So that was always my motto in grad school. I don't know if it's the best best advice, but you know, I just kept trying. And you know, the thing about graduate school and academia, and a lot of people that are in academia that are Latinx and are in academia know that it's not about being the smartest, it's about being able to navigate things and the politics of that. So when I think of the politics and the privileges of passing and non-passing, it really has to do with being able to navigate and understanding that sometimes that cultural capital we don't have as first generation students, but we acquire that. And one of the ways that I was able to do that was with the mentorship of other people in Mecha who were older than I was, and people in LAFA that were a couple years ahead of me. So I really just was like a sponge and just took all the information that I could to do. And for example, I didn't know that grad school was a possibility, that grad school was even a thing before going into undergrad. So, and it was because of that I was able to get exposed to that. So just a couple of things. So I like I said, like my first pick was me in a dress. I was 2. And then I kind of chose a few picks where you can see most of my clothes is like more masculine. And the one picture that I have a dress is a picture of me in Mexico. My mom forced me to take a picture and I was not having it. And finally she took it anyway with my face like that. And I will always remember that. But you know, after that, I would always fight it. I would always get into constant arguments with my mom. The top right one, I'm eating a piece of cake. Oh, I'm gonna eat a piece of cake. That one was after my older brother's first communion, and I wore a dress to church. And as soon as I got home, I asked my mom if I could change into shorts and a t-shirt. So that was really my life. And as I went into college, or as I was thinking about college, it was really my way out. It felt like my way out. Finally, I'm going to be able to, you know, just be who I am. And I wasn't even thinking about being queer. It was just really about me being who I am, not having to, you know, my parents are very strict. So I wasn't really allowed to go out. So it was like this is my ticket out, my ticket to freedom. And then, so I went to college, went to Irvine. It was close enough, close enough that I could see my family on the weekends if I wanted to, but far enough that I wanted to live on campus and I could justify it. So I went to college. Then the first thing I did, I remember the first week, like welcome week, I went and looked for the mecha table. I didn't know in what way or how I knew that they existed, but I knew. And I went and looked for them. And since day one, I was involved with mecha. And then through mecha, I got exposed to LAFA. And I have a couple anecdotes that I want to say. Like the first week, mecha would have a bonfire. I think it was the Wednesday, or I think it was, yeah, like the welcome meeting. After that, there was a bonfire at the beach. And I remember that Christian, he gave me and a few other people a ride to the beach. And I remember, I was just like this little freshman, right, straight out of high school. And I said something like, "Oh, that's gay." And Christian was like, "Whoa." He's like, "Hold the phone." And he was like, "Why?" And I was like, "Oh my God, what did I do? What did I say? Oh my God, he's gonna hate me." I'm like, I already on the wrong foot. And so that was kind of like my first moment of like, oh my God, I can't do that. Like, oh my God, is this like a queer space? And then the other anecdote that I have is actually with Dulce, that when I first met Dulce, like I knew she was out. And so I knew that these people, I was like, oh, these people are out. And they were out and proud, like they were doing the thing, right? And I remember that I would see Dulce and I was afraid of her, because I was like, oh my God, if she like talks to me and I say something, or already she knows I'm gay. Like I can't talk to her. I'm scared. So of course, sure enough, like a couple of months later, like we became super close friends. I came out in the first mecha retreat. It was like, I never thought I was gonna come out. But in a couple of months, it was just like, why am I even trying to fight it? It's not, it's just be gay. So really that was kind of my way into mecha, into LAFA, and it really just changed my life, because I, like I said, never thought that I was gonna come out, that I was just kind of gonna be a student and just never ever come out. And I do want to say that my parents were supportive. I first came out to all my friends in mecha, and my parents were not supportive at the beginning, but eventually they came around, especially my mom. I came out to her on the phone. I told her I had a piercing, an eyebrow piercing, and she was freaking out. And I was like, wait, that's not even the worst part. So, and I'll tell you later. And she was like, she hung up, and then I was like, and then she calls me back and she's like, I can't wait, tell me now. And she like went through all the scenarios, like, are you pregnant? Do you have a boyfriend? What's going on? I'm like, well, not really. I'm just gay. And she's like, oh my God, yo sabía, I knew it. So yeah, and so that was how I came out, and I just always felt the support of La Familia, mecha in general, but La Familia more so. And it was really the mentorship. Mecha had a mentorship program. It was through that mentorship program. It was through people like Christian, people like Dulce, people like Maria Malagón, who I know is here, that really just made the difference. And so, but it was also the professors, right? Like people like, I know Dulce mentioned, and Christian has mentioned them, like people like De Vargas, Raúl Fernandez, Gil Gonzalez, Janet Castellanos, all these faculty, right? It wasn't everybody, but it was people that, professors, and of course, the director of the Cross Culture Center at that time, Ana Gonzalez, who, when I would tell her like, oh, I'm feeling like this, she's like, oh, you should maybe try, going to the accounting center. And I was like, what? What a concept. So I did that, and that was also very helpful. So just having people to just kind of remind you of the help that's out there made the difference. So I wanted to kind of give you a few pictures here of kind of, I don't know if some of them were during undergrad, some of them were like kind of right after. So the one on the left is at UCLA at the Hoteria conference, or some kind of, I think that we went to go see Shari Moraga in that one. And then the one on the bottom with the Welcome Home Catholics, it's Eric and I, and we're at Long Beach Pride, I think. And then the top one, I don't know what event that was. I don't remember. And then another program that was really, really helpful just to that what we did as LAFA, right? So Christian, Dulce and I, we applied to become Class Cultural Center interns. And we were there together. And that was also like something that, it was like, oh, well, if we're gonna do things, we should probably do them together. It was like that year, which was their senior year, we were like always together on campus. We did everything together. Even like faculty would make fun and say jokes about how we were always together. And this is a few, I think it was a little bit after. So the top one is in San Francisco. When I graduated, and when my friend Wendy and I graduated, everybody and a bunch of people from LAFA kind of pitched in and got us tickets, flights to San Francisco. The bottom one is the Marcha Lesbica in Mexico City. So doing these kinds of events, right? So La Familia was really a space to do activism, to do organizing, to do professional development, and socialize, of course. But more than anything, it was really just a place to be yourself and be out, be queer, and no judgments, or yes judgments, but it was okay because we all judged each other, but with not really, it was constructive criticism in many ways, I felt. And yeah, and so finally, I graduate school, like I mentioned, like Illinois was middle of cornfields. I need to get out of here. I went to the University of Arizona, and I was so lucky to find mentors that were helpful in so many ways, just supportive. They pushed you. They pushed me to be a better scholar. My chair, Abraham Acosta, and two people that I absolutely adore, Dr. Laura Gutierrez and Dr. Sandra Soto, who are these badass queer Chicanas that just are brilliant, but also very supportive of grad students of color, especially. So one of the things that I would say, if you're thinking about going to grad school, and just find your people, find people like mentors that will vouch for you and have your back and be there when you need them, but also be there to push you when you need them to push you, right? And this is actually Rainbow graduation when I received my PhD. And a lot of people that I love are there, and they all came to Arizona to be with me during that time. So sort of kind of full circle, and really doing work. My PhD is in Latin American literature and culture, but my project is focused on looking at always looking at gender and sexuality, using queer theory, queer analysis to look at cultural production. So I've something that started actually in undergrad. I was my honors thesis was on masculinity and narcocorridos. I remember doing an honors thesis, and I remember with Dr. Raúl Fernández. So yeah, and then finally, I guess I'll end here. Is coming to be able to, having all those resources all my life, having that mentorship, being able to navigate as a queer Chicanx, like through passing and non-passing sometimes, and dealing with that, and also just finding I guess I knew that my first job was at the University of Tennessee, but I knew that was a stepping stone, that I knew that I wasn't going to be the end. So, sometimes we're in this place that we know that that's just a necessary step to get to where we are. And I finally, I am so happy that finally I was able to get a job that I am just so happy about. You know, this is a picture of my department. You know, women's studies departments are kind of infamous for being very white. And I'm lucky to be in one of the most diverse gender women studies departments in the nation. So I'm just absolutely elated. I don't know what else to say, but just kind of want to say thank you for letting me reflect on all these things. And I just want to say that I'm a resource to people who, you know, are, if you are thinking of grad school, if you're going to grad school, and also if you know, if you're queer, if you know you're dealing with all these things at the same time, you know, it's different. It's very different from having a mentor that only understands one sort of side of your experience versus having someone that understands everything that you go through because they went through it as well. So yeah, I'll end here. Thank you so much. And this is my contact info. I have my email. I don't have a webpage, but I have a Facebook, and that's really like it's basically my LinkedIn professional page because I don't really have a LinkedIn. So yeah, so thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gonzalez, and everyone for tuning in. I think we can begin just by asking if any folks within the audience have any questions or anything they'd like to share. Or I can go ahead and just ask the question that I was just genuinely interested in. So something that I noticed that you mentioned within your presentation, you talked about times, for example, like the privileges of perhaps being more like masc presenting, especially maybe among other like femme presenting folks or trans folks. I was wondering, how can those of us who are more maybe like masculine presenting in the queer community try to highlight and uplift those members of the queer community that may like face additional marginalization in academia?
I think like, I guess like a practical thing, right? So one of the things that I've always seen in like seminars, for example, and like I'm sure you've seen that in your like upper division classes where you have smaller classes, and discussion is a big part of class, and in meetings right now, even now as a faculty, there was times, you know, where, you know, someone who's, you know, maybe identify as a woman or is femme presenting, they'll say something, right? They'll say, have an idea, and then, you know, nobody really pays attention, and then like the next person, a dude basically says the same thing, and you know, then it's like, oh, like that's the most brilliant idea in the world, let's go with that. And so I think at that point, right, to be able to recognize those moments, and I think it's difficult, right, when you're maybe if you're a grad student, you're starting out, you're like, I don't know if I want to like intervene in these moments, but I think those are key, right? So like creating people's awareness around those things, being aware, being cognizant of those things, and how even your own behavior, right? Like we might even play into that. So being aware of those things, and not really listening to people, and not just being like ready to say your own idea when you actually just didn't listen to that person. And I think that happens a lot to femme presenting people that are just kind of ignored when it comes to these spaces, right? So that's where they'll sort of like, a seat at the table isn't necessarily enough, right? It's like you need to be heard, your voice needs to be heard. So as someone that, if you feel like that's something that's happening, then it's something that you can do to intervene. I mean, that's sort of more the practical, what I've seen in grad school and seminars, when it was like the same dudes talking also, and like not giving enough space for other people to express their ideas. It happens all the time. And even in like places like gender and women's studies departments, I took classes in gender and women's studies at the University of Arizona, and I was always the dudes talking. So it was like, I understand, like, we want to listen to everybody's experience, but if you're taking up most of the airtime, then there's an issue there, right? Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez, for your wisdom. Is there any other questions from the crowd?
I have a question. One, thank you for making me feel old by talking about Hanga. Two, can you talk about how you felt when, or how powerful, or how, whatever the emotion was when you cut your hair short, and how that really just embodied who you are?
Yeah, so it was really just, I think it was I was sort of building up to it, because I was, during my first year of undergrad, I still try to wear dresses. My friends make fun of my little big black dress that I always wore. And because, it was like, okay, this is like safe, and I tried like the first year, I think. And then, after that, I was like, this is not going to work. I need to just be who I am and own it. And so I just was like building up to it. And then I remember that one of my friends actually bought me my first like button down collared shirts, and that was a very it was just, I don't know, it was a pivotal moment, like to just be able to wear that, things that I would always wanted to wear but I never had the courage to wear. So that, and then finally, I think it was a year after I graduated, I was actually the program coordinator for the gender education series at Irvine. And of course, my friends will never let me off the hook because I actually didn't go with them. I didn't tell them. So I went with another friend at the time, and I got my hair cut, and it was just, I remember I hung out, and I did it in Silver Lake, and I remember I hung out like it was a Saturday, and I remember I didn't go home until like 2 a.m. because I was so afraid of what my mom was gonna say. I mean, I wasn't afraid, and I was afraid. I didn't care that she was gonna say something. I just didn't want to face it. But I was like calling up my friends, like, "Hey, you want to hang out?" Like all day, because I was just like postponing going home and home. And then because I had called my mom and I told her, like, this is how I break the news to my mom from all the time. Like I came out to her on the phone, and then when I cut my hair, I told her, "Hey, guess what? I cut my hair." And she was like, "How short?" And she said, "Vas a estar toda pelona." And sure enough, the next morning, I was like hiding. I was like sleeping with my covers over, and she comes into the room, and she was like flips the cobija, and she's like, she almost like had a heart attack. But it was just so liberating, because then it took me a while to figure out how to style it. That happens. I think it happens to a lot of bitches that cut their hair, but eventually, it got to a point where I'm okay. But it was just, I don't know, it was like night and day to just be able, like, I always wanted this. I always wanted to be like this. This is me. How did it take so long? But it was just awesome. So thank you, Eric, for asking that question. It was amazing.
Liliana, I have another question.
Yeah.
Can you talk about, like, how did you know you wanted to go to college? So thinking about kind of that high school experience, and maybe other influences you may have had in high school that helped you get to college.
Yeah, thank you. So I think since 6th grade, I knew that I wanted to go to college, because my oldest brother, he was really smart, but he was kind of a party guy. So the school wasn't really like what he envisioned, and he graduated, I think, but he didn't graduate on time to be able to walk in graduation. So my mom was devastated. And so I was I told her, like, "Mom, I'm gonna graduate from high school, don't worry, like, and I'm gonna go to college, and we'll see. So you'll have plenty of graduations to go to." And she was like, "Okay." And so all throughout, and it was that sort of like, I want to make my parents proud. mostly because I knew I was queer, and I was like, I kind of want to, I don't want them to worry about anything. I don't want them to tell me anything, because, you know, I'm kind of like overcompensating for being queer, and like, so this is my way. Like, I'm the good student, I'm the good daughter, but I knew that college was going to be my way out to also not have to live under such strict guidelines. So when I was in high school, I was in a lot of college prep programs that were like also very, I mean, I knew I wanted to go to college, but you know, sometimes you don't know how. So those programs were great. I was in Upward Bound, and then EAOP, I forget what it stands for. And actually, Adeli's husband, Marvin Duron, was a tutor for Anaheim for EAOP. So I actually met Marvin before I met Adeli, and he was like, he would always clown me, but he would help me with my personal statement. And so yeah, and then when I got to Irvine, I was like, Marvin and Adeli was co-chair of MECHA at that time. Oh, early academic outreach program, yeah. Thank you. I was like, I don't remember what it stands for. Yeah. So that was kind of like my trajectory, but I didn't know about grad school. I was like, what's that?
Dr. Gonzalez, may I ask you another question?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, just because you stress the importance of finding social support throughout your graduate studies, I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more what that looked like. Was there like certain like venues or like community spaces that you sought out within like each institution to find that support, or what was that like?
So one of the things that was extremely helpful was one of my good friends from undergrad too, who's also a Machista, Frank Galarte, was also in grad school at Illinois. And so he was able to introduce me to a lot of people that he already knew. And so there was already like a community there. So that was helpful. And it kind of just happened that then he also went to Arizona around the same time that he got a job there, and I was going to grad school in Arizona. So that kind of really helped. So I would say kind of, I mean, it's not always going to work out that way that you'll know somebody who is at those institutions, but what I did do on my own, well, actually with Frank's help, and we started doing like programming, queer Chicanx programming. So we had, we one time had Dulce come give a couple times at Illinois and then at Arizona, come give a talk or a workshop on sex ed and sexual health. I think we did the queer, like the Joteria Loteria events. So that was one way. I was also the president of the Graduate Association at Arizona for the Department of Spanish. So I think that doing those types of things, right? Like, so if you're going to be involved and have CV things, if you're like, I want to add this to my CV, how is it also going to help you socially and emotionally? So, you know, be very strategic about the programming that you're in or the organizations that you're in, to be like, I want this to be a line on my CV, but how is it also going to support me? And, you know, how is it going to promote my care during these hard times? So be strategic too about what you get involved with, because you can get burnt out, and you can spread too thin. So yeah, especially if you organize as an undergrad, if you were very involved in everything. In grad school, you might feel like, oh, I just want to focus on my studies, but it's important to be involved in other things, but be strategic about it.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez.
Any other questions or comments, anything? Thank you all again for being here. Like I said, I know that it's tough with so many Zoom meetings and classes on, are classes still on Zoom? Yeah, so I understand. But yeah, thank you so much for being here, for taking the time. And again, if any of you ever need any advice or just want to chat about grad school or about just anything having to do with what I talked about today, just reach out. I mean, I have my contact info, but also Adeli knows how to find me.
And with that, if nobody has any more doesn't have any other questions, then we can close out. If folks feel comfortable unmuting, and we can give an actual audible round of applause, because I think it's always helpful for our speakers to actually hear it. Thank you so much, Dr. Gonzalez, for your presentation today and for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with our students. I'm trying to, okay, add spotlight. So I just want to take a moment to kind of close out the program and let folks know that this is part of a series that we're doing for the Latinx Resource Center. For those that don't know me, my name is Adeli Duron. I'm the director of the Latinx Resource Center, and also want to give a round of applause to Manny Teran, who is our Cutie Pop programs intern, who put this all together. So if we can give him a round of applause and a thank you. And then what I want to do is share with you all that we do have one more program to the series. It is next Wednesday on June 1st at, what time is it, at 4 p.m. There is a link for you to register if you'd like to register. We will be promoting it on Instagram. So if you missed the link, you can find it on Instagram, but it's a Cutley link. And so it's a Cutley with Cutie Pop Wellbeing is the link. So hopefully you can join us, and we'll see you next week. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.